Asia's best business minds and personalities with nowhere to hide and no way to avoid the questions. A captive interviewee for 30 minutes on board the Singapore Flyer. Welcome to High Flyers with Haslinda Amin.
Hello and welcome to High Flyers, the interview show with a different perspective. He was once a student activist, then an outspoken journalist who spent time in jail for his views. Now he owns the Banyan Tree, a string of luxury resorts around the world. Meet Kwon Ping.
As the eldest son of a high-flying diplomat and businessman, Kwon Ping admits he had a privileged upbringing, with an education and experience that took him all over the globe. What he saw in those travels spurred his social conscience, but like many of the revolutionary leaders he aspired to be, he ended up doing a stint behind bars. That's a far cry from the luxurious surroundings of Banyan Tree resorts and spas that he now owns. Locked into the Singapore Flyer for 30 minutes, Kwon Ping tells us how solitary confinement affected his outlook on changing the world.
Kwon Ping, you've had a colourful background. Back in Stanford, you were suspended for about a year because you were involved in student demonstrations. You wanted to change the world. What was the thinking then?
I guess the thinking of any young person is you do think you can change the world. And I think, to be fair, a lot of young people have changed the world, whether it be in apartheid or whether it be with even the election of Obama. Whether he can change the world or not, I don't know, but even the mere election of an African American as a president has changed America forever. If when you're young you don't think you can change the world, then when you're my age you won't even think you can change the community around you. So it's true, when I was young I thought I really could change the world. Of course I could not.
What about the world did you want to change?
I suppose having come from a privileged background, having studied economics, having backpacked a lot around the world, and having seen obscene wealth and obscene poverty in countries I've traveled in, from India to Indonesia to Egypt and so on, I guess I wanted to play my part to try to change the world. And I became a journalist partly out of the reason that I thought by writing about economic development positively and about writing about inequalities and so on, one could in one's little way change the world. That's already a big come down, being a journalist. I thought I was going to be a student revolutionary. It's an even bigger come down to be a businessman.
Your wife was cited as saying, when she described you, she said that Kwon Ping is a capitalist in his pocket, a socialist at heart.
It's probably true, yeah. And I think, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for one to be. I think now in this world, in this business world, the marketplace, market-driven economies, or capitalism as one would say, truly is the driver of all economic growth today. It's not governments, it's individual companies, entrepreneurs, businesses. That's really the driver of economic growth and well-being. So I am a capitalist in my pocket, meaning I need to try to make money, and profits are important to me. But socialist at heart means that essentially, what are you doing it all for? I don't think you do it just for shareholders. You do it for the community and so on. I do believe that as a business leader today, there's a message I need to give to other business people. And the essential message is that we should not be embarrassed to say that the fundamental mission of business is to create a better world.
I want to go back to the days when you were a journalist.
Yeah.
You were with the
best years of my life.
I bet. You were with the Far Eastern Economic Review. You were the Singapore correspondent. Yes, they went bust. But that job landed you in jail. You were in detention for about 2 months. What went through your mind back then?
Well, the first was how stupid I was. I think the main take I had was that you've got to become honest with yourself, and that's when I realized I was a privileged kid. I wasn't ashamed of what I did, and now neither am I today ashamed of what I did. I think I learned a lot from it. I think a lot of the causes...
It was for pro-communist articles?
No. The government said it was pro-communist, and I confessed on TV to being pro-communist to be pro-communist, but...
you were detained under the ISA, the
I was
Internal
detained
Security
under the
Act.
ISA, yeah, where you can be indefinitely detained, yeah. There were people there who were really fighting for causes and were willing to spend the rest of their lives in jail. I was not of that kind. And so I did whatever I had to do to get out, and I moved on.
Was it difficult being in confinement?
Mm-hmm.
What went through your mind? How did you fill your days?
When you have days and nights going on, when there's no differentiation between day and night, because the light is on all the time, there are no windows, you have no sensation of time. That is difficult. The most difficult part of it, not so much the physical part, I think it's the mental part. So now when I know about people who've been in solitary confinement for years and years, I realize the strength of character you have to have. I mean, I used to have to do things, I remember well, like following an ant that would be crossing the room and just sort of following, because you can focus on following the ant. I tried to do things like type in my mind to distract your mind. So it's the fact that when your mind is faced with endless time, you actually end up panicking. I would sit there sometimes and you would break out into a cold sweat and you would panic, because time is just going on and on and on, and you have no sensation at all. I'll always remember that very well.
It was also a time when you realized how much you loved your girlfriend, then now your wife, because as I understand the story,
Yeah.
you proposed to her when...
Yeah, she doesn't like the fact that it wasn't exactly the most romantic proposal.
But
to
to
me
you
it
it
pretty,
was.
Yeah, I was a revolutionary, so I can't do mushy stuff. You have to be macho about it. So, no, I mean, of course, I was detained and I wasn't allowed to see anybody at all. But when I confessed, and there was a time after confession and so on, I got to see my parents, but I couldn't see Claire at all. And Claire went through a very bad time, because a lot of our friends sort of deserted us. When I came out, I said to her, and I thought it was romantic, I said, if I'm going to, let's get married, because if I'm going to be thrown in jail again, I can see you. You don't think it was very romantic?
Okay, some romance there.
Yeah.
How was her reception? She
I
said yes
can't
immediately,
remember.
of course.
Well, I think it was kind of like, that's a pretty stupid idea, that you are going to get arrested again, but okay.
Coming up, finding the perfect resort location.
It's your R factor. It's your wow factor.
He's been a journalist, he's been jailed, and now a highly successful businessman. In 1994, Kwon Ping created Banyan Tree, high-end resorts and spas in beautiful destinations. He's seen thousands of beaches and locations to find the ultimate Banyan experience. Kwon Ping joins us in the Singapore Flyer.
Even as a teenager, I loved to backpack. I, spent my 19th birthday on top of a pyramid in Egypt, and I backpacked around Europe. And then when my girlfriend, now my wife, went around Europe, we went by trains. We would sleep on the trains. We would do the things that every youngster has done. I think we found that to be really romantic in its own way, not just for ourselves as a couple that learned how to be together and to find each other, but also it was all about the romance of travel. We've had that always with us. And when I had the chance to do a hotel brand, which we stumbled into as an opportunity, I think two things came together. I had long wanted to show that Asian companies could establish their own brands and could make it in the rest of the world. That was one objective I've always had in my life, even before I started Banyan Tree. And the second thing, of course, was this love for travel and the romance of travel. And I guess the third point that we had was this sense about responsibility to the world. We put it all together and we came up with Banyan Tree, and I think it's been very lucky for us that it's been relatively successful.
How do you choose your locations? You're known to be in pretty exotic locations. How do you do your homework? What is involved in the whole process?
Now that we're more established, I got teams of people who have all these checklists about stuff, you know, whether we should go there or not, whether the population base is enough or not, whether access is good enough, whether logistics and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, that's only the sort of base factors. That's why I have to go to a place. There's something that in our group we call the wow factor. And it's something that's the combination of everything you've seen. Like I've seen over 1,000 beaches. And if
is it a case where you step on a certain location and you feel,
wow? Yeah, exactly. You say, I say, wow. Okay? So it's your ah factor. It's your wow factor. You can analyze it. I can analyze it for anybody now, because I've seen so many. And I can analyze it pretty from a business point of view, whether it'll work or not. So I do resorts where I know it'll work, it'll make a lot of money, and it's not really wow. But the wow ones are the ones where I have a special love for.
The world recognizes the brand of Banyan Tree. It has received more than 700 awards. 700 awards.
Thank you.
Where do you go from here? I mean, what else do you want to achieve?
We think we've done quite well so far. But as I always tell my colleagues, in any business that we're in a dangerous phase now. We're at a dangerous phase where we tend to believe our own PR. And that's the onset of hubris. When you think that what made you successful will continue to make you successful, and therefore you start repeating the same old things. I think that's the beginning of a gradual downfall. So we have to be very careful that we don't start believing our own hype about ourselves. In terms of where we want to go, we definitely have only scratched the surface. We've said before that we want to string a necklace of jewels around the world. It's not a case of volume. It's a case of real, beautiful locations. But I think over the next 10 years, we really want to build upon that base to create that necklace. We have a lot more things to do in terms of our corporate social responsibility. We have a lot more to do to make our associates feel that the Banyan Tree culture is unique and can carry on by itself. And we have a lot more to do in the sense that I need to feel really confident that Banyan Tree can go on without me.
Coming up, pushing his father's business in a new direction.
As long as you're just being cheaper than your competitor, you're like a hamster in a treadmill. You're just running and running and you're not getting anywhere.
Kwon Ping spent his youth pursuing his ideals as an activist and later a journalist. He spent 2 months in jail, released only after confessing to being a pro-communist. Later he became the reluctant heir to his father's company. Locked into the Singapore Flyer for 30 minutes, Kwon Ping tells us how he steered the company in a new direction with the creation of Banyan Tree.
Let's take you back to the early days. You took over the family business because your father fell ill. He suffered a stroke. And you said that you were taking over because you were the eldest son in the family. Were you ready to take up the responsibility then?
No, absolutely not.
What would you rather have done then at that point in time?
Well, actually, I wasn't planning to come back to the family business. I was a journalist, a very disreputable journalist, thrown out of countries and all sorts of things. But I had wanted to leave journalism and had actually gotten an offer to be a research fellow at INSEAD, the European Business School, for 3 years to write about some topics that I had been interested in. So I was ready to go. My wife and I were going to pack up and go, and she speaks French, and she was also doing her thesis, a master's thesis in Hong Kong and so on. So we were all kind of happy to be quiet sort of academics, which now in retrospect I wonder what it would have been like. But we were going to go in that direction. And my father fell ill, and I came back, and I have no MBA. I never studied business, so I really wasn't that equipped for it. And one of my biggest regrets is that I never had the opportunity to really work with my father when he was well. So by the time he came back, he wasn't totally immobilized by his stroke, but he clearly wasn't in his best element anymore. So I had to really just take up the leadership from there. But I would have liked to be able to work with him and learn from him. And from what I hear about what others said about him, I would have liked to be able to see that part of him. But I didn't have the chance to do that.
You transformed the family business.
Well, I transformed it by shedding a lot of it and decided to move it into a new direction.
How do you stay relevant amidst all the competition that you're facing right now? You know, a lot of people say businessmen will always have to be nimble, change with the times. How is that implemented in Banyan Tree?
I sort of analyzed our business, and I analyzed the business world around me. And this is back in the 80s, when China hadn't really surfaced yet as a low-cost producer. And I guess the summary of my conclusions about our businesses and about a lot of Southeast Asian businesses was that they were basically predicated on low-cost labor, on cheap labor. And we were too. And contract manufacturing. We would assemble things for everybody else. But I guess my epiphany was when, in one year, I remember it was sort of in 1990 or so, I had already taken over the whole company, and I had set up a joint venture with a Japanese company to manufacture canvas shoes for Adidas, Reebok, and Nike, and all the rest. And within 1 year, I had to shut it down because we did it in Thailand, and then Indonesia became cheaper. And that was my wake-up call. This was even before China came on the scene. And I think the wake-up call was, as long as you're just being cheaper than your competitor, you're like a hamster in a treadmill. You're just running and running, and you're not getting anywhere. There'll always be people cheaper than you are. And my conclusion was that you need a proprietary advantage, meaning you own that advantage, as opposed to a relative advantage. A relative advantage is cheap labor, because you're only more competitive to the next guy on a relative basis, who is cheaper than the other guy. Proprietary is when you own it. Now, in my worldview, there's only two proprietary advantages. Technology, you could be an Apple, you can be Microsoft, or you have a brand. We decided that Banyan Tree, more than anything else, probably more than even being a hotel operator or anything to do with luxury, was going to be a successful, sustainable Asian brand.
Coming up, Kwon Ping's changing view of the world.
I have changed. But to anybody who says I've sold out, I would say that's a fair call, and I'm not going to defend myself.
Kwon Ping's Banyan Tree Group is named after the Hong Kong fishing village in which he once lived. Then he was an impoverished journalist driven by ideals. Locked in the Singapore Flyer for 30 minutes, Kwon Ping answers the tough questions on whether he's still committed to those beliefs.
You've said before that the baby boom generation, which you came from, the people there have not really forgotten the spirit of the past, of the times, but it's just a matter of expressing it differently.
Yeah.
How do you express it?
That fire of idealism which was lit in our youth for people of my entire baby boom generation, which really, in my view, has changed the world as a collective generation. Many of the ideals that we harbored in our youth, we still have today. How do I try to change it? In many ways. I try to change it in my work with the university. I try to change the world in little ways by being a commentator, because I've always argued that in the new Asia, with Asia's economic rise to power, we need a lot more Asian thought leaders, especially in the world of business, who don't just talk about business, but Asian businessmen who are willing to talk about the society they live in. So I try to do a little bit of that. And of course, in my own company, I try to do the things that we believed in. It doesn't manifest itself necessarily in street demonstrations, but the driving force for it, the search for wanting to make people's lives better, for improving people's lives, finds expression in what I do every day.
So what's your response to people who say you sold out?
I would say that it is always a matter of perspective. I would say I have changed. And to some people, that would be a selling out. But by the same token, to anybody who used to believe perhaps that socialism was the answer to the world's ills, then everybody has sold out, because I can't think of anybody today who believes that communism or even hardcore socialism can solve anything. I guess my rejoinder to that would be, some people sell out, some people are so scared of admitting that they were wrong that they stay wedded to a rigid line because they are fearful of even being able to change. I would say that I have changed. But to anybody who says I've sold out, I would say that's a fair call, and I'm not going to defend myself. I know who I am, and I believe that I haven't sold out. I believe I have changed, and everybody's entitled to their views.
Your kids, how do they take to your history, your different experiences? How do you even begin to tell them not to do anything when you've done everything?
What Claire and I try to impart to them are not just simple rules, because that would then be hypocritical. It's really more about the values and what lies behind the rules. Now, to give you one example, most younger people in Singapore are Singapore bound. But when my eldest son reached 16, I basically packed him off to go and backpack around with no money, a few $100s in Vietnam. I said, you should go through this. So he went through that, and he loved it. We encourage our children to be independent. We encourage them to see the world and travel it on their own, and at the same time with us. And I hope they think they've got a pretty cool dad.
How would you describe Kwon Ping?
I guess I would like to be remembered as a person who wanted to do something in this world within my limited capacity. And hopefully I've made a difference to the people who I'm associated with. I'm not talking about changing the world. I'm not even talking about changing a country or society. I try to change the community that I'm involved with and the people I'm in touch with. And if I can change some of these people, if I can change and affect an SMU student so that he or she is inspired to do good things in life, if I know that I have changed the life of some of my associates in Indonesia or Maldives or China by giving them a better livelihood and also giving them a sense of purpose in life, then I think I've done something. And that's how I'd like to be remembered.
Kwon Ping, thank you so much for being on High Flyers. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.